Lesson 6, the aspects. Introduction. There is only one more basic subject to learn in order to understand and read a horoscope. This subject is aspects. When planets are placed at a specific number of degrees away from one another, they are said to be an aspect to each other. Aspects are a great value when interpreting character and also when reading events. The different aspects are listed on page 55. If we use our previous analogy in which the planets are the actors, the signs are the roles they play, and the houses are the settings where the roles are played, then the aspects would show us how actors play their roles. Some aspects are said to be flowing or harmonious, and other aspects are said to be challenging and inharmonious. Flowing or harmonious aspects are pacifying, mollifying, or 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 easy. So let's look at these schematics. So these are a table of aspects, major aspects. So get a good look at that, screenshot it or whatnot. These are symbols we're gonna, more advanced symbols that we're gonna need to know. Conjunction, which is 7 degrees, sextile, 60 degrees, etc. 90-degree square, trine, 120 degrees, opposition, 180, etc. Once again, go back on YouTube and rewind this. Okay. The challenging or inharmonious aspects are considered tension producing, stimulating, or even irritating. But keep one thing in mind, no aspect is either good or bad. Too many flowing trines and sextiles can make you a dull and uninteresting person. Anything seems easy and life flows in an uneventful and probably boring pattern. A few challenging squares, oppositions, or conjunctions can stimulate you and give you depth of character. A little tension makes life more interesting. On the other hand, too many squares and oppositions with no trines or sextiles to create flow may make you bitter, stubborn, resentful, or irritating to yourself and to those around you. Astrology is no exception to the rule that we need some of everything to create a whole human being. If you look at the table of aspects on page 55, you will see that we have listed both major aspects and minor aspects. The major aspects are the most important aspects and the only ones you need to learn at this time. We've included the less important aspects here for your information only to present you with the entire picture. Don't try to learn them now. Just keep them for future reference. The column labeled orb gives you the number of degrees of difference from the exact angle that is allowable for each aspect. However, the influence is strongest when the aspect is closer or even exact, also called the partile, and the influence is weaker as the orb widens, also called the platic. Also, note in the table of aspects that the glyph for each aspect is given. It is important that you memorize these glyphs, for you will use them frequently from this point on. Basic character is formed by the most exact aspects in the chart. Please be aware that different astrologers use different orbs. Some will never go past 6 degrees, while others will allow as much as 14 degrees. The orbs here are the ones we have found to work most consistently. To get a quick look at the basic character, you may wish to indicate the exact aspects within 1 degree in darker ink when you complete an aspectarian. See page 73. When you think of squares or oppositions, remember the divisions by qualities, which you learned in lesson 1. These divisions form the basic patterns for squares and oppositions. For example, the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. The sign of Aries always squares Cancer and Capricorn. Cancer always squares Aries and Libra. Libra always squares Cancer and Capricorn. And Capricorn always squares Aries and Libra. By the same token, Aries and Libra always oppose each other. And Cancer and Capricorn always oppose each other. This same principle applies to the fixed and mutable signs. Of course, planets in these signs must fall within the allowable orb in order to form aspects. See the diagram on page 68. For example, the moon at 10 degrees Aries squares Mars at 15 degrees Capricorn. And there's a schematic to translate what was just read. This illustration has an orb of 5 degrees, from 10 degrees to 15 degrees. If the moon were at 10 degrees Aries and Mars at 23 degrees Capricorn, the orb would be 13 degrees and too wide to form an aspect. This same principle applies to trines, but trines are based upon the division by element. See lesson 1. Each fire sign trines the other fire signs. Each earth sign trines the other earth signs. Each air sign trines the other air signs. And each water sign trines the other water signs. See the diagram on page 68. For example, at 14 degrees Leo, trine Saturn at 18 degrees Sagittarius. An example of a schematic. Here we have an orb of 4 degrees. However, with Jupiter at 14 degrees Leo and Saturn at 25 degrees Sagittarius, the orb would be 11 degrees, too wide to form an aspect. This gives you a general idea of what aspects are. Now, let's discuss the 6 major aspects in more detail. So there's a schematic of a conjunction. 0 degrees indicates emphasis, inauguration, intensification, concentration, and new activity. A conjunction is 2 or 3 planets located within an orb of 7 degrees. Usually, the planets are all within the same sign, but occasionally they're found in adjacent signs. Adjacent means next to. For example, Venus at 28 degrees Aries conjuncts Mars at 3 degrees Taurus. In this case, the orb is 5 degrees. The principal characteristic of a conjunction is that it gives more emphasis to a sign, since 2 or more planets are involved. The action of a conjunction is direct, and it affects you on an outer and obvious level. Conjunctions are considered favorable or unfavorable, depending on the specific planets involved. When you realize that these planets are merely a focus of activity, then there is nothing necessarily good or bad about them. For example, Jupiter shows expansive growth, and Saturn's function is orderly, limiting, and crystallizing. Whether the conjunction of these planets is favorable or not depends on what is doing the growing and what is being limited or restricted. The expanding of a tumor is unfavorable. The same tumor being restricted is beneficial. The growth or expansion of a career is beneficial, but of course, the limitation or restricting of a career is unfavorable. A group of 3 or more planets in conjunction is called stellium. A stellium creates its own action and greatly emphasizes the sign and house in which it occurs. Here's an example and a schematic of a square, 90 degrees, indicates challenge, action, often dynamic, tension, accomplishment, turning points. The square involves 2 planets that are 90 degrees, or 3 signs apart. The orb will allow for squares is 7 degrees. The potential of any chart lies in its squares. If you do not understand them, they can be stumbling blocks. But if you handle them wisely, they can be stepping stones or building blocks. Action and decision are the essence of any square. It is important to know whether the square is cardinal, fixed, or mutable. The cardinal squares, the action is quick. In cardinal squares, the action is quick. In fixed squares, the action is slow and deliberate. In mutable squares, the action is variable, depending to a great extent on the influences of others. This follows from the attributes which we learned in lesson 1. A T-square or T-cross involves 3 planets where 2 of the planets are in opposition. Before we proceed, we would like to insert a brief note about how to read a string of aspects, like the T-square given in the following example. When reading a string of aspects, always read each aspect as an aspect to the first planet listed, in this case, the sun. Thus, we would read this aspect. Here's an example how you would read that. The sun at 15 degrees Aquarius squares Jupiter at 19 degrees Scorpio, and the sun is in opposition to Neptune at 16 degrees Leo, forming a T-square. In the diagram below, you can see where the name comes from because the configuration resembles a T. Here's an example. Let that sink in. A grand cross or grand square involves 4 planets with 2 pairs in opposition. Again, this name becomes obvious when you look at the configuration below. Note that all 4 of the signs involved in a given quality are represented. For example, Mars at 20 degrees Taurus squares Neptune at 21 degrees Leo, squares the sun at 20 degrees Aquarius, and is in opposition to Jupiter at 18 degrees Scorpio. Here's a schematic to reflect that. Here, the sun opposes Neptune, and both square Jupiter and Mars. with Jupiter and Mars also opposing each other. This is a grand cross in fixed signs. The configuration in the horoscope would look like this. There you have it, the schematic. Fixed signs. Let that sink in. There's an opposition schematic, 100 degrees, 180 degrees, indicates awareness, outreach, balance, cooperation, and conflict. The opposition involves two planets that are 180 degrees or 6 signs apart. The allowable orb is 7 degrees. This is the widest possible aspect. Its potential value is to develop perspective and awareness. Oppositions show opposing factors at work, which complement each other when reconciled. When reconciled, they present challenges just as squares do, but they are different. They are a different type of challenge. An opposition involves recognizing a lack within yourself and using the polarity of the two signs to meet that lack. Imbalance then becomes balance. Reconciliation of the opposing forces is usually achieved through awareness and understanding. For example, Mercury at 16 degrees Gemini opposing Mars at 11 degrees Sagittarius. Schematic to reflect that. In this example, we see that the mind, Mercury, is quick, clever, literary, expressive, and curious, Gemini, but lacks idealism, broad-mindedness, and a philosophical approach, Sagittarius. By the same token, the energies, Mars, are directed in fields that involve philosophy or higher education, and things are done with enthusiasm and optimism, Sagittarius. However, intellectuality and ability to express in clever, witty, or literary ways is lacking, Gemini. Thus, when this person learns to use the Gemini Sagittarius polarity, creating a balance of the opposite poles through increased awareness, this aspect will become constructive and useful. Here's a schematic of trine, 180-degree angle, indicates flow and ease, idealism, inspiration, harmony, um, indolence. The trine involves two planets that are 120 degrees or 4 signs apart. The allowable orb is 7 degrees. The trines are generally favorable. A trine permits easy interaction between two planets, but there is also no compulsion to use the planets advantageously because there is no stress or tension here. Trines are not always a positive aspect, but may contribute to a tendency to choose the line of least resistance. Or they may cause indolence. Trines go with the natural flow of things. They indicate natural creativity, talent, the ability to express things easily, and pleasures. A trine might be compared to the fun of a skiing downhill, while the square might be compared to the struggle to climb the hill. Look at the sense of accomplishment when you reach the top of the hill and look back upon what you have conquered. On the other hand, the trine shows the joy of life and the love of living. Both of these aspects are parts of life. The grand trine involves 3 planets about 120 degrees apart, using a 7-degree orb, with all three planets in the same element. For example, the moon at 12 degrees Sagittarius trines Mercury at 10 degrees, Aries and Neptune at 16 degrees Leo. Mercury and Neptune are also trine each other. Thus, these three planets form a grand trine. As you can see, all three fire signs are present, and we refer to this grand trine as a grand fire trine. In conjunct, 150-degree angle indicates adjustment, reorganization, lack of perspective, and strain. This in conjunct involves two planets that are 150 degrees or 5 signs apart. The allowable orb is 5 degrees. In this aspect, the signs involved are totally unrelated to each other. They share neither the same quality nor the same element, nor are they both active or passive. With nothing in common, it is much harder to integrate these forces, and this aspect calls for many adjustments. The inconjunct demands a change of attitude, a change of habit pattern, and a need to adjust to conditions indicated by the planets and houses in question. Often health and or finances are involved in some way. Mhm. Sextile, 60-degree angle, indicates opportunity, attraction, self-expression, affability. The sextile involves two planets that are 60 degrees or 2 signs apart. The allowable orb is 5 degrees. Active or passive signs sextile each other. Passive or negative signs sextile each other. Fire and air signs sextile each other. So do earth and water signs. With this compatibility, sextiles create an easy and understanding in the gathering of information and in expression. The planets cooperate with each other. As always, keep in mind which planets are involved, as well as which signs and which houses. For example, Moon sextile Mars. Here, we are combining the emotions, the moon, with the physical energy and drive, Mars. If the 5th and 7th houses are included, love affairs and partnerships are involved. If the sextile is in Aquarius and Aries, then we are dealing with intellect and independence, Aquarius, plus individualism and impulsiveness, Aries. Let's assume that the moon is in the 5th house and Mars is in the 7th house. This would indicate that what you seek in love affairs or romance, 5th house, is similar to what you seek in a partner, 7th house. The sextile helps to blend and integrate these two planetary forces. General rules and guidelines for aspecting. Keep these general rules in mind when you analyze a horoscope for aspects. 1, each sign has 30 degrees in it, from 0 degrees to 29 degrees. 2, aspects are always figured by counting signs, not houses. Otherwise, you might overlook a sign that is intercepted in a house. Just because a sign is not on a cusp does not mean that it is not there. It is. And it has 30 degrees, just like any other sign. If the first house cusp is in Cancer and the second house cusp is in Virgo, the sign Leo is intercepted in the first house. Each house does not necessarily contain 30 degrees. 3, when a planet is exalted or dignified, See lesson 3. It can integrate well and can handle all aspects in a more positive manner. 4. Check for out of sign aspects. These occur when a planet is at the very beginning or end of a sign. For example, Jupiter at 4 degrees Leo square Saturn at 28 degrees Aries. This is an out of sign square, but it is within the allowable orb, so it is still a square. 5. An applying aspect is stronger than a waning aspect. For example, applying the moon at 10 degrees Taurus trine Mercury at 16 degrees Virgo. Waning or waning, the moon at 16 degrees Taurus trine Mars at 10 degrees Virgo. In the applying aspect, the moon is moving toward Mercury and is thus said to be applying. In the waning aspect, the moon has moved past Mercury and is thus said to be waning. The faster planet is always listed first, whether applying or waning. The applying aspect shows something you are working towards. The waning aspect shows something that has been recently learned. The relative speed of the planets is shown in lesson 3. The aspecting faster planet is the doer, and the aspected slower planet is the receiver of the action. 6. Aspects to the sun are the root, seed, and the plant of the character. Basic character is formed by the most exact aspects in the horoscope. Aspects show tendencies, abilities, and disabilities rather than attainment. In other words, the natal chart shows your potential, but your free will indicates how much or how little you do with it. 7. Since Mercury is never more than 28 degrees away from the sun, the only aspect it can form with the sun is the conjunction. Since Venus is never more than 46 degrees away from the sun, the only aspect it can form to the sun are the conjunction, the semi-sextile and the semi-square. Because we are only studying the major aspects, now we needn't look for more than conjunctions between Venus and the sun. Understanding the basic meanings of aspects. In the example of the moon sextile, Mars, which we gave on page 63, we illustrated once more the logic of astrology, the basic meaning of each sign, each planet, and each house never changes. The key words stay the same. As time goes on and your knowledge increases, you will add your own words based on your understanding of the nature of each sign, planet, and house. This same logic and basic understanding continues when you are learning to aspect. You already know that in astrology, we always keep the flat chart or natural wheel in mind. See lesson 1. When we delineated Roosevelt's horoscope, see lesson 5, we added a Capricorn overtone to his Cancer moon, located in the 10th house, because in the flat chart, Capricorn is the natural sign of the 10th house. The conjunction is a 0 degrees aspect. Keeping the flat wheel in mind, we always start with the first house. The first house is the natural house of Aries, and its planetary ruler is Mars. Thus, all conjunctions have a first house, Aries, Mars, a feeling of drive, activity, and intensity, no matter where a conjunction actually occurs in the chart. This adds to the feeling of emphasis, which naturally occurs when 2 or more planets are placed together in the chart. See lessons 2, 3, and 4. The square is 90 degrees aspect, is a 90-degree aspect. In your mind, picture a 90-degree angle. This angle again starts with Aries, and 90 degrees to one side takes us to Cancer, Moon, and the fourth house. In the other direction, 90 degrees takes us to Capricorn, Saturn, the 10th house. We are talking of an angular and cardinal feeling. Cardinal always implies dynamic action and intensity. See lesson 4. Thus, the square always signifies action, challenge, stimulation, and stress. The opposition is a 180-degree aspect, and it does just what the words say. One planet opposes the other. Opposite to Aries, Mars, in the first house, we find Libra, Venus, and the seventh house. It is an angular and cardinal position, and it challenges and dynamics are similar to the square. But here, the I orientated Aries is now reaching out to the cooperative we orientated Libra. Aries needs to learn cooperation and balance. When Aries changes self awareness into awareness of others, the conflict of this opposition becomes a cooperation. All oppositions reflect this Aries Libra conflict, regardless of the actual position of the aspect. The trine is a 120-degree aspect. It involves Aries, Mars, and the first house, and either Leo, Sun, and the fifth house, or Sagittarius, Jupiter, in the ninth house. Because Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius are the three fire signs, this is a harmonious aspect, creative, Leo, Sun, and even at times indulgent, Sagittarius, Jupiter. All trines reflect the basic aspect, the basic pattern, which we see in the flat wheel, no matter which element they occur in. The inconjunct is a 150-degree aspect. It involves Aries, Mars, and the first house, and either Virgo, Mercury, and the sixth house, or Scorpio, Pluto, in the eighth house. Quick, impulsive Aries has to cope with the exact, studious, and down to earth Virgo in matters related to duty, work, health, or habits, the sixth house. Some sort of adjustment is needed to draw these diverse attitudes into alignment. One on the other side of the wheel, Aries Mars, first house, needs to cope with the penetrating, determined, and oversensitive Scorpio in matters relating to other people's resources or in areas of research and regeneration. But of these instances show two natures that are very divergent. A clear perspective and some kind of reorganization are needed before these signs can function well together. You can see that the inconjunct is a difficult aspect. It can produce stress and strain because it is always an aspect between divergent energies. The sextile is a 60-degree aspect. It involves Aries Mars and the first house, and either Gemini Mercury and the third house, or Aquarius Uranus and the 11th house. In either case, we are dealing with a combination of fire with air, which are compatible elements. Here, outgoing Aries joins hands with communicative and intellectual Gemini in the third house, or with humane intellectual progress and friendship orientated Aquarius and the 11th house. All sextiles are between compatible elements, either fire and air or earth and water, and are always combinations that work in the affable way, expressing themselves easily. So here are some schematics of trines, fire, earth, air, and water trines. 90 degrees in opposition, 180 degrees, schematics for cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Schematics for sextile, 60-degree position. Schematic for inconjuncts at the 150-degree position. More conjuncts. Pick it back up on the next one, on lesson 7. Let me stop this recording. But yeah, how y'all feel about that chapter, man? Y'all behind or y'all